The Locked On Blue Jackets, top 25 players under the age of 25. Let's get into it.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I also have to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Like I said at the top of the show, I've spent the last week and a half, 2 weeks-ish, collecting responses to the top 25 under 25 rankings that I put out. And basically, all this is, if you are not on Twitter and you have missed the several episodes that I've mentioned this, or if you're new here, in which case, welcome. Glad to have you along. The top 25 Blue Jackets players that are under the age of 25, and by Blue Jackets players, I mean in the system, or were drafted by them. So, like, draft picks, legit. Prospects that are in the AHL, legit. NHL players that are under the age of 25 as well. So there were 42 Blue Jackets that were eligible for the ranking. And so I've pulled the top 25 from Rumble Rank, which was actually a great system that I thought it was really easy to use. Hopefully, you know, the you guys that did this also enjoy it. Sounds weird, but hopefully it was not too complicated or time consuming to use. And so I've pulled the top 25 from like the rankings that you guys did. And then I've pulled 3 more honorable mentions, which were guys that were in my top 25 that didn't make the consensus top 25. So we're going to talk about those 3 guys today. And then we're going to talk about the guys that went between 25 and 21. So actually what we're going to do is I'm going to start off because that'll ruin the fun. I was going to name the guys that didn't end up getting ranked at all, but if your favorite prospect is in here, I'm sorry. Or if he's not in here, I guess I am sorry. But let's get into it. Let's talk about the honorable mentions. And we're going to start off the honorable mentions. Like I said, guys that I had in my top 25 that did not appear in the consensus top 25 that I'm kind of varying degrees of surprised about, right? So the first guy that I want to talk about is Jordan DeMay, who I believe ended up at 27 or 28 overall in the overall rankings. So like just on the outside, Jordan DeMay is a really interesting prospect in terms of he is interesting to study as like this is a guy that basically scored at will in juniors. In his draft season, he put up 109 points in 68 games. The season after that, he put up 140 points in his draft -1 season was no, I was right. I can read. His draft season was 109 points in 68 games. The season after that, he put up 140 points in 64 games in the QMJHL. The only player in the entire CHL that scored more than him that season was a guy called Connor Bedard, who you may or may not have heard of, right? Now, I will say the QMJHL is typically considered to be the easiest league to score in and does not necessarily translate to scoring at the pro level, etc. Season after that, so this is the year after he was, or 2 years after he was drafted, 47 points in 21 games for the Mooseheads. Got injured, I believe, had surgery, and then was, I believe, put on team suspension for a DUI charge that he got in Halifax, which has since been dropped, I believe, because the officer that charged him or the officer that like stopped the car just didn't show up to his court date. So the charges have all been dropped. Last season was his first pro season with the Cleveland Monsters in the AHL. Again, really injured, only played 21 games in total, had 11 points. So kind of a rough start to his pro career. Went pointless in the playoffs, only played 2 playoff games for the Monsters in the end, and didn't record a point in either of them. he is still very young, right? Like, this is not something to be concerned about necessarily. He's only 21. The thing that concerns me with Dume, and I think the thing that probably concerns a fair amount of people, is they wanted a little bit more from him when he hit pros. You don't go from scoring over 2 points a game in the juniors to scoring about half a point a game in the AHL. Like, that doesn't feel like that's the right equivalent, right? I'm not saying that he should have been a point a game player. And maybe, again, partially this is, trouble adapting to systems. The fact that he was really injured for a lot of the year, didn't ever really get a chance to get his feet under him, But to make third-round pick, if you get an AHL player, a reasonable AHL player, I'll say, out of a third-round pick, like, I feel fine about that. I don't think he'll get NHL games this year, but there are NHL games in Dume's future, I think, just not right now. So, I know that some fans are really high on Dume and some fans are less high on Dume, but I was surprised to see him not in the final top 25 under 25. And that's not to say that the names that are in the top 25 under 25 are undeserving. It surprised me that he was ranked outside of the 25. Second guy, again, similar-ish story. William Whitelaw, extremely good offensive talent. There are some questions about maturity, about adaptability, things like that. Went to the University of Wisconsin for his freshman year, had 17 points in 37 games, entered the transfer portal, went to the University of Michigan for his sophomore season last year, 18 points in 35 games. So improved the production a little bit, playing slightly less, which is, again, generally a pretty good sign. And he's playing fewer minutes as well, because I don't think he was the guy in Michigan that he kind of would have been in Wisconsin. I believe he has entered the transfer portal again. I don't know if he is set to go back to the University of Michigan for his junior year. That concerns me. Like, playing on 3 different NCAA teams over 3 years, I think, is probably a little bit of a concern. He probably is going to turn pro at the end of this upcoming season. That will be my guess. And again, he's similar to Jordan Dumais, very, very, very talented offensively. Unlike Jordan Dumais, I think it's more translatable to the pro level for Whitelaw than it is for Dumais. But it's the reports of, coachability and maturity and stuff that do kind of knock him down the rankings for me. Again, phenomenal offensive talent if he can put it together and if he can figure out, I'm going to call it off-ice stuff, even though I don't think it's really specifically, off-ice versus on-ice stuff, but there isn't a problem in his actual game, right? So I would consider that kind of an off-ice issue. Well, not an issue, but, question mark. Again, just kind of surprised that he's been left off the list, but he was, I believe, and I don't have them up because, again, Locked on Blue Jackets bingo, I closed that tab and just wrote down the players that I needed. I believe I had him at 24 or 25 on my list. So, like, again, just snuck under the wire. I believe the consensus had him at 28 or 29. So, like, not much of a difference, but obviously enough of a difference to cut off, to miss the cutoff point. Third player is one that I am not necessarily surprised, or third honorable mention, I should say, is one that I'm not necessarily surprised that was left off. I tend to rank goalies higher than the average person, but he was much lower than expected. Sergei Ivanov, I believe in the consensus ranking, was something like 37 or 38, which really did surprise me. And like the goalies in general, barring the main guy aside, were ranked typically lower than I thought they would be. I think every goalie was ranked. The consensus ranking for every goalie was lower than I would have had him. But Sergei Ivanov, not even, if I hadn't kind of cherry picked the guys that didn't make it to the guys that I wanted to talk about, he wouldn't even be in the honorable mentions, because I considered just doing 26 to 30 as honorable mentions, but that kind of felt like cheating because then it's just a top 30 under 25, right? Sergei Ivanov, obviously, the size is an issue. The KHL is an issue, by which I mean, I don't know how much playing time he's going to get this season. They can't loan him out because it's the final year of his contract. the organization that he plays with is kind of not known for letting its young players play, let's say. But he put up excellent numbers on the famously terrible HK Sochi. And yes, the KHL does bump the stats of their goalies. I think they also bump up like the shots that their players take. Like there are more shots for and against per game in the KHL than there are in the average pro league. And again, whether that's just a KHL specific thing or whether that is the numbers getting fudged, it's my understanding that the numbers are getting fudged slightly, which whatever. Like I'm not I'm not the IAHF. This is not my problem. Not that the IAHF has jurisdiction over the KHL, but you know what I mean. Like, it changes functionally nothing that they are fudging these numbers. I just feel like it bears mentioning because Sergei Ivanov's numbers are so good in the KHL that I think, and I've fallen prey to this, if he stops the puck there, then he'll stop the puck in North America, right? Ivanov to me is kind of a question mark. I expect him to turn pro by the end of this. And when I say turn pro, I mean come to North America. Obviously, he's been playing pro for a few years now. I expect him to come to North America by the end of this season. Probably we'll see a couple of Monsters games with him in action. I question whether the Monsters are going to be a playoff team this year or not. So I don't know whether we'll see him in the postseason there, but it sounds to me like he's going to be in North America before this season ends. So that's kind of interesting and exciting. I understand why he was left off the top 25, but I am surprised he was so far down the rankings because I like Ivanov a lot. I think he is probably of the goalies that we're going to talk about in this list. Like he did end up at the bottom, and I do think he is probably at the bottom of the goalie prospect pool rankings. I'm not including Nolan Lalonde in this, although he was on the list. He did not make the cut or the honorable mention. I think he was 41 or 42, like really, really far down. Which Melvin Strahl I forgot about as well. He's in there somewhere. He also was ranked underneath Ivanov. But of the goalies that made the list, yeah, I get it. Ivanov is probably at the bottom of the list for me as well, but I just was very surprised at how far down the list he was when you mix in the skaters as well. But those are my honorable mentions. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to talk about 25 through 21. So we've got 5 players to talk about, some surprises, again, and some players that I just really like. So I'm excited to talk about them. So we're going to do that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I'm going to tell you about Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why we have Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. It does all of the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. One feature that Monarch has that I really love is it tracks all of your subscriptions. And like, I am sure the 99% of the people who are listening are like me. You sign up for a free trial, you forget. You see the $5 or whatever going out every month, and you're like, it's probably fine. It's probably for something that I'm actually using. Nope. Canceled, I think 4 subscriptions that I was paying for that I didn't realize that I was paying for with Monarch Money. And save myself like $30 a month, which is not a lot, but is not nothing. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. Welcome back to the Locked On Blue Jackets top 25 under 25. We're actually going to get started with the top 25 under 25 now. We're going to talk about number 25, and that is Victor Hedin-Raftheim, who is a blank canvas of a player, right? I'm kind of surprised that he made the cut. He was definitely a guy that I had lower down in my rankings. But I think that the exciting thing with him is like just potential, right? Like he was a 6th round draft pick. Yeah, drafted 173rd overall. He's still only 17. He doesn't turn 18 until like a week and a half from, like, I think next Tuesday he turns 18. So very, very, very young. Hasn't played pro hockey yet. He spent last season with the under 18 and the under 20 teams of the National. So he played for J18 National and J20 National, as well as J18 Region for Brigna, and didn't put up a lot of points. He's not going to put up a lot of points, but I think the reason they took him is extremely good defenseman. Athletic, if not the most coordinated guy in the world, which I do think is probably because he's 17 years old and 6'5", and I would not be surprised to hear that he was like 5'10" 2 years ago, and just woke up one day and was 6 inches taller. And so I think like I don't know that there's an NHL player there, but there's potential there, and again, if it's a 6th round draft pick and in, 4 years' time, he comes over. We've seen it before. Guys get drafted that late. You kind of put them in Sweden or Finland or wherever, and you forget about them. They come over at 22, 23, 24, and you're like, oh, there's a serviceable player here. So I think if anything happens, it's going to be that. But don't expect anything from Raft Time in at least the next 4 years, right? Like you might get a Gavrikov out of him. Like that's kind of best case scenario, right? Is that you get a Gavrikov. What is more likely is you get a guy that probably just kind of plays in Sweden, maybe comes over for a cup of coffee in the AHL. But I'm not looking at Raft Time as an NHL option. If it happens, it'd be nice, but I'm not sitting here like, man, I would be really, really disappointed if Raft Time didn't make it, right? He probably won't. Chances are low, but not zero, right? I do think he's going to be an interesting player to watch just because he is so young and so raw. And like, if you can get hold of him now, see what you can do with him, right? Like it feels very similar to what the Sharks did with Hao Shi-Wong, who they drafted, I believe, 33rd overall, who again is a very young, very big, very raw defenseman. And again, if you can turn him into something, then you can turn him into something. It really depends on how you feel about your development staff, which I think the Blue Jackets are quite proud of their development division. It'd be nice if Don Waddell stopped trading all of the prospects away before they got anywhere, but that is another problem entirely, right? That being said, I'm not like disappointed in Raft Time's position on this list. I am surprised that he was ranked above guys like, Whitelaw and Dumais, who I do think pop more as prospect. But I'm not going to sit here and say that he's a bad prospect. I think, again, like potential is the buzzword with Raft Time. Potential is the buzzword for a lot of these guys, I think. But Raft Time, I think, is a particularly intriguing one just because of his size and his age and just how like untested he is. I'm going to be really interested to see what happens next season. I believe he'll probably play J20 again, which is the under 20s league in Sweden, but there might be a pro opportunity there for him. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. 24, guy that you're all familiar with, Mikhail Pucha, still currently without a contract, but stepped into the NHL, like I was going to say full-time, not quite full-time this season, but he did play 47 games. Which I was not expecting. He was a guy that I kind of was like, yeah, he'll probably get a cup of coffee and then go back down. And he stuck it out, and yeah, he didn't play a ton per game. He didn't put up a lot of points. He didn't shoot the puck a lot, which that was his big thing in Finland was shooting the puck, right? And he scored a lot of goals because he was shooting the puck a lot. He's very much a volume shooter. So that to me is something that you need to work on at the North American level. Had 7 points in 47 NHL games for the Blue Jackets, and then had 16 in 28 for the Monsters in the same season. So pretty good for, again, a guy that was drafted in the 4th round. 5 years ago? Like he's still only 23. I think there's probably a bottom 6 forward there. I don't think they played him a little higher in the lineup occasionally. He got some time with Adam Fantilli when they were trying to figure out literally anyone for Adam Fantilli to play with. But I liked his game a lot. Again, I think there's definitely things to work on. But he, I think, is going to be an interesting name. I don't think he makes the roster out of training camp, but depending on who does make the roster out of training camp, Mikhail Pucha, for me, is at the very, very top of my list for guys that are going to get called up in case of injury. And I'm going to knock on wood there because my hockey powers can only be used for evil. Like I said, currently without a contract, has, I believe, signed his qualifying offer. So there's an option there. I believe he's been given his qualifying offer because he needed it for insurance to play in the World Championships in April or June, whenever they were. May is the month between those two. No contract yet. I expect it'll get done. Like that's gonna be like a late August. Hey, here's a 1-year contract extension for Mikhail Pucha for like $900K. Like that's what it's gonna be. It's not gonna be anything flashy, but again, there's potential there, and I think he showed himself pretty well this season on a team that struggled in the bottom six. I think he held his own in a way that I wasn't necessarily expecting him to. So again, unsurprised at his inclusion on this list. I believe I had him a little bit higher, but like 22 or 23. So like again, pretty close to this list, the consensus list that I'm working off of. We've got 3 more players that I want to talk about today. So we're going to take another quick break. And then when we get back, we're going to talk about another goalie, which I'm very excited about. So hopefully you guys are as well. That's coming up next on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I'm going to tell you about Indeed. You just realized that your business needed to hire someone yesterday, but how can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Their sponsored jobs post puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidate faster. I have been in a position where I needed a job like yesterday. I open Indeed. At the very, very top of the page, I am clicking that job post. You get seen by way more people. And the more people who see it, the more likely you are to get that job filled with a quality candidate. Because frankly, the only people smart enough to use Indeed are the people that are smart enough to be working at your company. You can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're going to finish off this section of the top 25 under 25. We're talking, we've done 25, which was Victor Hedin Raftheim. We've done 24, which is Mikhail Pucha. 23, Pyotr Andrianov, who, again, I was surprised to see him this low. I think and maybe this is, again, just kind of the fan base comments that I see. People seem pretty high on this guy, and I think reasonably so. He is big, he is athletic, he is a little bit heavy right now, but I imagine that's because he's 18 years old and hasn't figured out how to, I hesitate to use the word puppy fat, but like that's the vibe I get. Like as he gets older, he'll probably fill out in a slightly more streamlined way, let's say. But again, put up very, very good numbers in the MHL last year, which is the Russian Junior League. Had a 23-6-6 record and a .942 save percentage with 3 shutouts, allowed less than 2 goals a game on average. I don't know where he's going to play this upcoming season. It looks Elite Prospect has it listed as the MHL team that he played for last year, which was Krasnaya Armia Moskva. And then they have CSKA Moskva as the KHL team that owns his rights. Now, he is going to be in the KHL for at least the next 4 to 5 years. This is not a problem. This is just how long goalies take to develop. I understand that people would like the goalie to develop a little bit closer to home, but even if he did move closer to home, like he wasn't good. Like he's not going to be a viable NHL option until he's 23 anyway. Like goalies, that's just how long goalies take. And like this is a conversation that I've had what feels like 25 times on this podcast already, but Igor Shesterkin was, I think, 25 when he came over from North America. Ilya Sorokin was 26 when he came over to North America, right? Like Yaroslav Askarov, who's probably the closest comparable to a guy like Andrianov, was drafted in 2020 and is just now getting into the NHL. Yes, he spent a bunch of time in the AHL for the last couple of years, which, you know, has helped his development massively. But I like Andrianov a lot. Depending on how he develops in Russia, I think is going to be the key. But like Russia develops good goalies, like some of the best, like many of what I would consider, you know, the top 10 goalies of, let's say, the last decade, last 15 years have been Russian. They just they do a good job with goalies, and so I am more than happy for Andrianov to just kind of hang out in Russia and develop there. And he'll come over when he comes over. Yes, it kind of sucks that you spent a first-round pick on a guy that you're not going to see for 5 years, but it is what it is. He wasn't going to last until the 4th round, which I believe was when their next pick was. So they took him, and that's just kind of how it is. Yeah, there were guys on the board that I would have been happy with, but I don't know. The more like I watch Andrianov, like the more I watch footage of him, and I'm going to be keeping as close an eye as I can on him this year in the KHL. If he's playing in the KHL, like there's a goalie there. There really is. So it's going to be really interesting to see how he develops in Russia, and again when they can get him to come over, and hopefully when he comes over, he's ready to step directly into the NHL. If he's not, don't rush him, right? We've seen what happens when you rush goalies. I think Elvis Merzlikins is a goalie, for example, that could probably have used a little bit of AHL seasoning before getting thrown into the NHL the way that he was. But hindsight is 2020, right? Once the hindsight is 50-50. That's a completely other thing. But Andrianov, 23 on this list. I think I had him a little bit higher, but I understand why he is about where he is on this list. Next is a guy we're going to talk about who's very new to the organization. Jack Williams signed as a college free agent out of Northeastern. Made his NHL debut at the very, very end of the season. Played one game for the Blue Jackets. It was their last game of the season. I thought he was fine. He didn't really stand out massively, but I wasn't expecting him to. But he wasn't like a liability, right? Like he looked like a guy in his first NHL game that had just come out of college. The key for me is, what do you get from him in the AHL this season? I think he is a dark horse candidate to be on the NHL roster or potentially be that 13th forward. But I personally think like the best thing for him, and this is something I'm always going to say this about the young guys, right? Like sometimes the best thing for them is to go to the AHL and play 1,000,000 minutes a night, right? Like give Jack Williams top 6 or ideally top line AHL minutes instead of sticking him in the press box as that 13th forward. Like that's not going to help his development. That's not going to make him to a better player. Yes, he'll get the NHL practices, but he won't be getting the game situations, and that's how you improve, right? And I do think that was why, you know, not to completely derail this, but David Jiricek's NHL development got completely derailed a couple of seasons ago because he wasn't playing. They would call him up and stick him in the press box and then send him down, and then call him up and stick him in the press box and then send him down, and, you know, like just horrifically mismanaged was David Jiricek by the Blue Jackets organization. And that's not a great sign, frankly. I don't think it was probably more of a coaching and then GM thing than the player development team, but like that's not how you develop any player. So I don't want to see any player doing that. And I think that Jack Williams, I think, is a guy that like you could probably throw into the bottom 6 and he'd be fine. But I personally would put him in the in the AHL. I think probably there's a bottom 6 forward there in a couple of years' time, but just let the guy cook, right? He's intriguing for sure. By all accounts, great dude, really, really nice guy. You know, played for 3 years at Northeastern, finished his 3rd year there at with 41 points in 37 games. Like there's a player there, and I think I'm gonna be really interested to see what his what his offseason was like and how he comes into training camp. Because for me, he's one of the guys competing for what is potentially an open spot on the Blue Jackets, or, he's competing to take a job from someone, for example, like Miles Wood. I think that Miles Wood's job should be not set in stone. I think his name should be on the roster in pencil. And I think that there's a guy like Jack Williams out there that I think is definitely capable of taking it. So that's what I want to see from Jack Williams. Is I want to see him try and take that NHL job. And if he doesn't take it, fine, try again next year, right? Or like Pucher, I think he's going to be one of the first guys to be called up if there's injuries on the Blue Jackets this season. But overall, a fine choice in the top 25 under 25. I think, again, a kind of a question mark of a player, but there's potential there. And I'm trying not to use the word potential when I talk about all of these guys, but that's kind of how prospects work, right? They are potential. Let's finish off. Last player that we're going to talk about today is number 21 in the rankings. This one surprised me and kind of starts off a little bit of a run of surprising players in general. I think the next 5 players are guys that I'm like, really? So we're going to talk about Luke Ashton, who was a draft pick last year, a 6th round draft pick, is absolutely enormous. He is 6'6". He's 238 pounds right now. He is 20 years old. Turns 21 in January, and is playing in the upcoming season for Cornell University. Last season he was at Minnesota State. Mankato had 13 points in 38 games. Again, you're not looking at Luke Ashton to be a difference maker on the score sheet. He is just he is enormous. Like, that's kind of what you're looking for from him. Skates shockingly well, for the fact that he is, approximately the size of one of those giant American fridges that you all seem to have. Eats a lot of minutes, throws his body around. Like, I wouldn't want to get in between him and the boards, right? Like, I don't know if there's an NHL player there. Again, he feels like a solid middle of the pack AHL guy. Again, maybe I'll be wrong. My guess is he'll probably turn pro in a couple of years here. He's only got one college season under his belt right now. Came out of the BCHL, which I think is interesting because that's where Jeremy Loranger came out of, that everyone lost their minds about because he scored a bunch. But I'm going to be really interested to see what happens with Ashton. I don't think there's much of a player there, and that might be just because that's an archetype of player that I don't know there is a specific need for in today's NHL, by which I mean, yes, shutdown defensemen are important, but I think that there's a difference between being a shutdown defenseman and just being a guy that throws his body around, and I'm not sure necessarily which one Ashton falls under right now. We'll see. He is not a player that excites me. Again, some of the guys that were listed underneath him. So, again, Williams, I think, is really intriguing. Pucher, I would have had above Ashton. Ivanov, Whitelaw, and Dumais, my honorable mentions, I also probably would have had above Ashton. This kind of is a little bit of a run here, and we'll talk about the next 4 guys in Wednesday's episode. But Luke Ashton's appearance on this list, I think, was the most surprising of the 25 guys that made the cut. His inclusion was the most surprising. Him and Raftime. I kind of have grouped those 2 guys together. I think partially just because 6th round draft picks that are enormous, but I think there's more potential to Raftime than there is to Ashton. So I was kind of surprised that he made it this high up the list. So that's the list so far. At 25, we got Victor Hedden Raftime. At 24, we got Mikhail Pucher. At 23, we got Pyotr Andrianov. At 22, we got Jack Williams. At 21, we've got Luke Ashton. On Wednesday, which is going to be our next episode, we're going to talk about 20 through to 11. And then Friday's episode is going to be 10 through 1. So make sure you stay tuned in for those. If you are one of the people that got involved in the rankings, I appreciate you all. Thank you. This was a lot of fun to put together, and I'm having a lot of fun talking about all of these guys. Got a lot of really, really fun players to talk about coming up. Once you get to the top 10, I'm like, man, this is this is a truly silly list of good young players. So, and honestly, even the top 15, I would argue is really, really exciting if you're a Blue Jackets fan. So tune in on Wednesday. That's our next episode. We're going to talk about players 20 through to 11. Thank you once again for listening to this episode, for making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. You can find me on Blue Sky at JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets on Twitter. And if you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again. And until Wednesday, make sure you stay locked on